Hi, I'm Eric DeHaas. I'm a family medicine resident in Kelowna, British Columbia. And here's just a couple quick tips on the upcoming CaRMS interviews. I'm going to start off by saying this that I am in no way affiliated with any sort of interview process. I have no say over who gets accepted into what. Um, so just kind of take this advice as you will. And if you prefer to have a different strategy, that's totally fine. This is just one potential thing you could try to implement. This year, all CARMS interviews are going to be done virtually, so there's a couple extra things that are important to think about. I did a little bit of research online to find some online tips about this, about interviewing on Zoom, and everyone recommends having lighting as one of the most important things. And one good way of getting some lighting is by facing a window. So behind the camera here, there's a big open window with some natural light, which apparently has some good qualities for lighting. Another one to consider is the background. I've sat myself in front of a neutral background where there's nothing too much that could get me in trouble back there. So that's one option. If there's try to avoid any clutter or any sort of things that could be interpreted negatively from your background. Another thing with any CARMS interview is, of course, to dress professionally. Last year during my CARMS interviews, I wore a full suit with tie and everything. Pretty much everyone else that I saw was wearing a full suit if they were a guy, or women were wearing equally professional clothes.
One piece of advice I'd have for CARMS this year is with the video interviews happening, patterns and stripes probably won't show up quite as well on camera, so you might want to go with some solids.
Posture is again very important for any interview, even on Zoom. So try to sit up nice and straight with good posture. If you've got a chair that reclines, maybe not the best to have your seat super reclined during your interview. So kind of sit up nice and straight. Another good tip would be to put your phone, your computer, and anything else that can kind of disturb you on Do Not Disturb. It would be frustrating during an interview if your phone kept going off and bugging you, or emails kept coming in on your computer making ding sounds, or if you live in a house with other individuals, it might be helpful to put a Do Not Disturb sign on your door. I previously lived with quite a few roommates who were not always the most professional, and it would be inconvenient if they were to pop through your door behind on your Zoom and say or do something that perhaps you don't want the interviewers to see. So even just putting a little Do Not Disturb sign on your door might be helpful. Another thing that could be helpful for any sort of interview is to have water readily accessible in case you get kind of a dry throat or something along those lines. So you can have that just kind of off screen in some sort of nice looking water container. Having a sip of water can also give you a couple seconds break if you need to kind of think something over, or if you just need a moment to kind of get back into the zone. So those would be a couple of the quick tips for Zoom specific interviewing.
Hello, dear CARMS applicants. My name is Hassan. I'm a UBC Kelowna family medicine resident. I don't have much to offer when it comes to the logistics of making sure that your audio, video, internet, lighting, and all those things are working properly that you wouldn't have already thought of, I'm sure. I think generally I would say you should have a checklist and a setup that you go through the day before the interview and make sure that everything's working as intended. You can also look at this video and pick out what not to do, like sitting in the corner like this. But otherwise, I'm sure you guys have a lot of coaching already on what's the right way to approach video interviews. I was mentored by my previous class, and they gave us, along with the school, a list of commonly asked questions. And so I went through those questions and I made sure that I had some semblance of an answer or a scenario that I could put into those answers that I practiced beforehand. So for example, if someone asked me in a panel interview, what defines resilience for you, then I would be able to reach into my experiences, which I had thought of in advance, and use that in this answer. And throughout clerkship, I had a bank of these experiences that I kind of, had a general idea of and noted down. So, for example, during each rotation, I would write down specific patient encounters that I thought were meaningful. And then, of course, I would also look through my previous life experiences and write down previous life experiences which were meaningful and applicable to these questions that were given to us. So I think those were the two things that really worked for me. Just having this bank of experiences that I noted down that I could pull out experiences from, and then having these set of questions that I practiced with and timed myself and recorded myself doing. The biggest thing is just to be positive and believe that you're on an even playing field, and that positivity will come out in the interview. And of course, prepare as you think you should. Don't overdo it, don't underdo it. You know yourself. So just do it, do what feels right for you. Thank you.
I think one piece of advice that I would give you guys is to think of, one, why you want to do the specialty that you're applying to, and two, have a good kind of tell me about yourself question. One other thing you can do is try recording yourself on your laptop, whether it be through FaceTime or something. You can watch it back to see how you interact via a video.
There's a couple questions that are going to be very common on most interviews. I think the most common one that I had last year, and everyone else kind of tends to agree, is the first question of, tell me about yourself. And this can be tempting to go through a list of your CV with all your best things that you've done. But your interviewers oftentimes have already read your CV, they have that information, and by you reiterating it, it's going to not be a super engaging experience for them. So sometimes it can be a better strategy to think of a couple, kind of 3 things that you think really define yourself and talk about those in a little bit more detail, and you can allow the list of CV to be left to your CV. Another common question would be, why do you want this specialty? Almost every interview I had, they were asking, why this specialty? And why in this location? It'd be very helpful to think these things through beforehand, because sometimes you're going to be interviewing for something that may not be your top pick, but it's still important that the program believes that you're very interested in their program. So think about a couple things that would be unique about that program, which could be why you want to go to that school. One really good resource to read over is the CaRMS website. The program descriptions. Read through the program description of that program shortly before doing your interview there to kind of have it fresh in mind, so you can be like, oh yes, this program had the ultrasound course that I was very interested in, so that's why I'm interested in doing it in your location. Or if they're asking about why family medicine, you can say that you love the diversity of family medicine and it's an in-demand specialty where you can go practice wherever you would like. There's a ton of advantages that you can talk to the interviewer about whichever specialty or location that they're in. Another common question is they sometimes ask you to go over things related to CanMed roles. So there's the 6 CanMed roles, and I myself kind of I had an idea in mind for each of the CanMed roles, both a situation where it went well and maybe it did not go as well, and then what I learned from each of those experiences. So the 6 CanMed roles are professional, collaborator, communicator, leader, health advocate, and scholar. So think of a time where you communicated well and maybe a time that you didn't communicate as well, and then have what you've learned from both of those experiences, and do that for each of the different CanMed roles. You don't want to have a canned answer to these, but it's helpful to not be sitting there for a full minute kind of thinking about an example. Whereas if you have an example kind of top of mind, then you can go into a discussion about it, but not from a memorized kind of script that you're thinking of.
So one thing that I did to try to prepare for CaRMS was I thought of life experiences from a bunch of different settings. So like previous jobs, sports that I did, and then med school. things like conflicts and working in a team and stuff like that, and just had those ideas in my head walking into interviews, because often the questions will relate to those, and it just allowed me to do less thinking on the spot and kind of go from there.
Another thing that I implemented and other people found helpful as well is before each interview, I would do a power posture. So there's a TED Talk by Amy Cuddy, and she discussed power postures, and there's actually some good evidence behind it, where before your interview, you stand up kind of in a wide-based stance with your shoulders nice and broad, and it'll actually increase your confidence going into that interview. Even during the interview, if you kind of sit in a nice posture, is better than if you're slouched and kind of small with your arms crossed and your legs crossed. Kind of just sit in a nice, confident posture, and then you'll actually come off as more confident as well. There's some evidence behind that I'm not going to get into, but you can check out the TED Talk by Amy Cuddy. We're also going to be developing another video that's going to have some practice interview questions, and I would encourage you guys to look at that interview video as well and kind of practice those interview questions, and then ideally video record yourself and then look at those videos of yourself, and you'll notice little things that, I was initially sitting all cockeyed like this. Maybe I should just practice sitting a little bit more straight, or I was way back, or I said 20 times. So these would be something that would be potentially helpful to videotape yourself and then review it. Ideally, try to videotape yourself in the exact location that you plan on doing your interviews. Then you can find out, there's something in the background that maybe I should move, or maybe, the furnace is super loud if I sit right in this spot. Maybe I need to make sure I turn down the heat or something so the furnace doesn't turn on during my interviews. Or maybe your dog is scratching at your door because they want in. So these are things that you can practice in the actual location that you're going to be interviewing in, and they can be helpful. And then you can kind of make little adjustments to really optimize your interview performance. So stay tuned for that other video, and we encourage you to practice each of those questions and try recording yourself or have someone watch you answer those questions, and that can be very helpful. Hopefully this video has been helpful, and best of luck on your interviews.